buildings. It underpinned the whole notion of America, and part of that was freedom from the tyranny of the state.
Right.
And I do feel,
yeah, go on.
I do feel that we have an ever-encroaching state.
So, for 3 days, the Conservative Political Action Conference is in London, chaired by former Conservative Prime Minister Liz Truss, with speakers like Lucy Connolly, Nigel Farage and Laila Cunningham. It's organised by the American Conservative Union and is based on a similar event in the States. And it's billed as charting a course for a prosperous sovereign future. Laila Cunningham's speech focuses on the risks to freedom in the UK. And she joins us now. Hello to you, Laila. You're out there today talking about Britain and the risk to freedom. How free or otherwise are you suggesting we are in comparison to the rest of the world?
I like to compare ourselves to the United States, and I was lucky enough to be at the 250 celebration there and July 4th. And what I found remarkable was the number one word that underpinned all the celebration was freedom. It was everywhere. It was on, it was on all the buildings. It underpinned the whole notion of America, and part of that was freedom from the tyranny of the state.
Right.
And I do feel,
yeah, go on.
I do feel that we have an ever-encroaching state in our lives.
Right, you say that. I don't know what your evidence is, and of course saying...
I could tell you.
No, I will. I'll come to it. Saying the word freedom endlessly doesn't mean anything substantially. And just for clarity in terms of evidence, the freedom rankings placed the UK 24th out of 194 countries. Similar findings from Freedom House. So we are here classified as free. The evidence is that we are, in the UK, a free society.
What are the 24 countries before us? Why are we not at the top of that ranking?
Well,
this is the United Kingdom. This is Great Britain. We should be in the top 5 at least. I don't think 24. I think that's an indictment of the lack of freedom we have in our country.
So what is your evidence that we're not free?
Well, I will tell you. So you're getting arrested for tweets. The government has said that they want to limit access to social media during general elections. They've asked YouTube to rejig their algorithm so mainstream news goes to the top of the algorithm, distorting, the freedom of the market to decide what people want to watch.
And are there any limits to the market?
Sorry?
Are there any limits to freedom of the market?
I don't think there should be any limits to the markets of freedom of thought. No, I'm talking about freedom of thought. Of course, there's regulation that protects, and there's regulation, but there's also regulation that is classed as safety when actually it's an infringement on freedom. And for me, that is an infringement on freedom. I don't think the government or anyone in government or anyone in a regulator should be an arbiter of what I, as an adult, can see on social media. And I don't think the government should have any involvement in a company like YouTube, forcing it to make mainstream media news at the top of the algorithm.
I mean, Laila Cunningham, we've heard from Zia Yusuf and Nigel Farage about the dreadful threats to their safety on social media, threats that have meant they are quite fearful. I mean, are we not talking about some limits and boundaries there about people's personal safety?
So that there's a difference, Jo, between the government trying to clamp down on opinion and someone trying to incite the murder of a political candidate. And I think anyone who's listening can see the difference. I don't think it is the government's role to try and limit access to social media during general elections. I don't think it's the government's role to determine what is acceptable speech and what is misinformation and disinformation. We even had Sadiq Khan, who was lobbying central government to crack down on people that post about crime online because in his opinion, that is misinformation and disinformation.
Well, I mean,
do you think that's acceptable?
I'm interviewing you about these things because you're obviously taking a stand. I mean, what risks? It is a conversation, but people don't want to hear necessarily my opinion. They want to hear yours. What risks are there to our freedom in the UK? You've mentioned disinformation. Are there any other risks to freedom in the UK?
Well, for me, freedom of speech and freedom of opinion is a fundamental freedom.
Sure.
And if that is under threat, then democracy is under threat, and that is a freedom that we want to protect.
And what about foreign interference, declining public trust?
Declining public trust comes from electing politicians who promise one thing in their manifesto and do something completely different. I can name a bunch of things that the Labour and Conservatives promised and did the complete reverse. For instance, digital ID was not in the Labour manifesto. Removing jury trials, which I hear will probably be reversed now, was not in the manifesto. That's what breaks public trust. It's not the freedom to express your views online that breaks public trust. In fact, that is robust conversation.
Right, but you mentioned you mentioned disinformation, Laila. What about denying climate change exists, for example? Because, a document called Our Contract with You on the Reform UK website contains demonstrably false claims about climate change. It states net zero means reducing man-made CO2 emissions to stop climate change. It can't. Climate change has happened for millions of years before man-made CO2 emissions and will always change. We are better to adapt to warming rather than pretend we can stop it. Supported by Nigel Farage and Richard Tice. I mean, is that the disinformation you're talking about?
No, I don't find that disinformation. And Jo, listen, there are many varying expert opinions on climate change, and the fact that you don't agree with it does not make it disinformation. And I think this is the problem, is that the mainstream media and politicians think that if someone speaks against the allowed consensus, you call it misinformation and disinformation. I think you'll find a lot of experts and a lot of people would agree that climate change and the methods that have been taken to address so-called climate change are not conducive to economic growth or to the good of the country.
Right. I mean, you also then talked about declining public trust. Do you think that public trust is declining in politicians when there is an acceptance of a £5 million donation that hasn't been declared from a billionaire who's based in Thailand?
Well, number one, you see, there you go. It's the assumption that it needed to be declared. And correct me if I'm wrong, but a parliamentary standard has not yet been found that it had to be declared. Nigel says that it doesn't. And there you go. That is where the trust fails.
Nigel Farage saying it is not the same as it being the case. All MPs are
well, but that is the question you asked assumed that he had to declare it. And it's this assumption by journalists that they know better, that they are judge and jury, is what has broken down public trust.
No,
hang on. You asked me a question. I expect you also to ask a Labour minister about the 138 million in government contracts that they gave to donors, or the Conservatives that gave billions in government contracts to donors. If anyone's talking about the intersection between money and politics and cash for favours or cash for contracts, then that is where...
Well, we asked endlessly, Laila Cunningham. We asked endlessly about it.
Scrutinise as much as you want.
Do you accept that might have also contributed to public trust? I'm not saying whether it was right or wrong, but do you think that something like accepting a £5 million donation from a crypto billionaire based in Thailand might have also contributed to a reduction in public trust?
No, I don't believe that's what's happened. We're still polling higher. And you know what? All the other parties could have put that argument to the people of Clacton, but they didn't.
All right.
And you could ask yourself why.
Let's talk about Liz Truss, because you're sharing a platform with her. Should she join Reform?
It's not me. I'm not the leader of Reform. I don't decide who joins and who doesn't.
No, but you're a prominent member. Do you think she should? Would she be a good fit?
I'm not going to comment on who should join and who doesn't. I'm not going to get into that.
Right.
It is a conference for Conservative views, and that's why I'm happy to speak at it.
All right. Now, Reform UK's chairman, in fact, I mentioned this a bit earlier, Zia Yusuf, has proposed a £100 million round-the-clock security plan for MPs. Do you support that idea? How would you fund it?
Zia Yusuf said he will put a fully costed plan to fund it, but I think he did point to the fact that we're spending. I was shocked at the number, 40 billion to repair Parliament, and he made the very important point that what's the point of having people in Parliament and spending all that money to refurbish it when the people there are too scared to speak? I think you don't only protect democracy by protecting elections, you also protect it by those that are standing up for the people and standing up for the views. And sometimes standing up against the consensus that is shared, it seems, between politicians and journalists.
Laila Cunningham from Reform, thank you very much for talking to us today.